Hey there, Drawyah here, and welcome to Microsoft Flight Simulator. In this video, we shall be going through a tutorial setup of the Boeing 787-10, going through its entire cold and dark process from FMS Config, pushback and engine starts, taxi, and takeoff. We should also be using SimBrief for our management computer setup, and therefore, if you don't know what this is, or don't have a flight plan ready to follow along, I'd highly recommend you watch the video in top right corner screen first, while I go for a flight plan setup. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the cockpit and let's prepare this flight. The first thing you want to do is head over to the overhead panel and turn on the battery. We'll set the external powers to on, and we'll also turn on the navigation lights, set the anti-icing to automatic, and turn on the window heating. Next, we'll then head down to the FMS and start setting that up. In the 787, FMS operation is not too difficult and can be done in just a few steps. So, first thing you want to do is head over to initialization. Here, we'll plug in the ICO code of our departure airport, in this case being Heathrow, so plug in Echo Golf Lima Lima, and input that. It now puts the position of Heathrow Airport into the reference, and therefore you want to copy that and paste it in set IRS position. So what that will do is now align the aircraft with the world coordinates, and therefore allow the aircraft to figure out where in the world it is, and therefore starts aligning itself to that. Next, we then head to the routing page, and this is where we start programming our flight plan. In this case, we're flying from London Heathrow to Helsinki Vantaa. So set our origin again, Echo Golf Lima Lima, plug in the ICO code for Helsinki, which is Echo Foxtrot Hotel Kilo. With that in place, we can now head over to the next page, and this is where we start plugging in our routing. When it comes to routing, there are two nodes that you need to be aware of: waypoints and airways. A waypoint is a set coordinates that the airplane will fly towards before turning left and right to the next waypoint. These waypoints are determined by VOR towers, and therefore the aircraft will daisy chain along them from VOR to VOR. An airway is an aircraft right of way. And what this will do is determine how the aircraft fly from the first VOR point to the second one. So this will take account into any airspace to avoid, any other traffic patterns, and therefore fly the aircraft around those when flying from waypoint to waypoint. So, starting things off, we'll be flying to the Bravo Papa Kilo point. BPK. Input that. As you can see, we have a choice. Now, you can use the SimBrief flight plan to decide which one you need to use. Well, in the case of this one, it's relatively easy to guess. As we're flying from London, we're in the northern hemisphere and not the southern one. And since the first and third points are exactly the same, you select either one of those and it shall be correct. After BPK, you fly to Quebec 2905, and that is an airway. So we'll insert that into the FMS and paste it into the via points. Now, as you can see, nothing's happened. However, it hasn't thrown back an error message, and therefore we do know that it exists, and therefore shall you select it once you build up the flight plan more. So plug in our next waypoint, which is Somva. And our next airway, which is up 155. Now, this time it has told us it's not in the database. So when it comes to Microsoft Flight Simulator, I have noted that the majority, if not all waypoints do exist, and they are in their correct locations, while the airways are missing the odd few. It's not a perfect database, but it's more than capable from flying you A to B, and it won't affect your routing in any way possible. So we'll clear that, and we'll go on our next waypoint, which is Mavas. As you can see, the Quebec 295 point has now appeared, and therefore we shall be flying that on our departure. After Mavas, we fly DCT to Tuska. What DCT means is direct. There's no airway, we fly to our next waypoint straight away. So we'll plug Tuska in. And then it's another direct point to Ririp. After that, we've run out of space on the first page. We click on the next button and start programming the second page of waypoints. In this case, flying at November 851. Once again, not in the database, so we'll clear that, and instead fly direct to Lakat. that, our flight plan is now complete. Select Activate, execute that. If you now head over to the navigation display, we set the display to plan and zoom out on the range, you can now see the magenta line out of Heathrow. So if we head over to the legs page, we can now go step by step along each of the waypoints, and make sure that the routing doesn't have any breaks in it, and make sure it flies us to Helsinki without any problems. In this case it does, so we turn back to map mode, and start programming the next setup, which shall be our departure. As you can see, we're departing runway 27 right out of Heathrow at the moment, so we'll input that. And our SID, our standard instrument departure, is Bravo Papa Kilo 7 Foxtrots. And so what a SID does is it segregates traffic departed from the airport. It will send it through a specific routing towards its first waypoint, while avoiding other aircraft in the area, especially avoiding the active landing runway as well. Therefore it keeps the airplanes separate, and therefore allows for safe operation of airplanes. You then want to go to departure, and on this page you'll set your SIDs and your active runway. A SID, or standard instrument departure, is a predefined route out to the active runway, and it allows you to fly out towards your first waypoint while taking a predefined and safe route away from other aircraft in the sky, as well as landing traffic. So these are all predefined and allows for separation within the air of all other traffic. So currently at Heathrow, the active runway is 27 right, with our SID being the Bravo Papa Kilo 7 Foxtrots. So we select both of those, head over to the navigation display, you can now see there's a new flight plan in yellow, and this shows the initial departure out of Heathrow. It's a lot shallower and also avoids all of the landing traffic, and therefore is a much safer route when departing. I'm happy with that, so we can go back to the route page, activate that, and execute. With our SID now in place, we've got one more thing to do, and that is to set up the performance. So today we're flying with a cost index of 29, so we'll input that into the FMS and set our cruising altitude of flight level 350. So we'll input 350 into the performance page, head over to the thrust limiter and takeoff. You can now see our takeoff speeds, V1, rotate and V2, with 182 knots being our rotates. So if you head over to the autopilot panel, you can set our speeds to 182 for the rotates. Also set our cruising altitude 35,000 feet, where we shall be cruising. Turn on the flight director, and with that, head back once again to the overhead panel. We shall turn the beacon lights on, as this will alert ground crews that we are going to start our engines and therefore now clear up the area around the airplane, as well as move to a safe distance. Turning on the 787 is a three-step process. First, turn on the fuel pumps, then you set the start switch to start, and then once the N1 is 0.2, we'll then stick the fuel control into the run position, and then that will start the engine of the airplane. So what we're going to do next is call the pushback tug by pressing Shift P on the keyboard. At this stage, we'll then wait for the pushback tug to connect up to the nose of the aircraft. When it does, it'll put a little bit of a push onto the nose. You feel a little bit of a tug. And so what that is the pushback tug applying pressure to the airplane to start pushing back. And so at that stage, we'll then turn off the parking brake and then go through the engine startup. So we'll wait a few seconds until you see the nose jolt. There we go. Parking brake released. Overhead panel. Fuel pumps on. Engine starter active. And then watch the N1 until that hits 0.2. There we go. Fuel control active. And now, the engine number 2 should start. With most Boeing aircraft, you always start the left-hand engine first, then the right-hand engine, because most of the hydraulic systems will be paired to the right-hand engine, and therefore you always go 2 then 1, in the case of the 747, 4, 3, 2 then 1. Use the ATC menu to turn the aircraft's nose for the pushback, It does take a little bit of getting used to how the position works, but once you learn it, it isn't too difficult to judge. And then wait for the start switch to return back to normal. This will happen automatically when the engines are running. And then, same as before, fuel pumps on, engine starter active, and then watch the N1 until it hits 0.2. We'll soon be ready to finish with our pushback, so we'll press Shift P again. Parking brake active. Fuel flow starts. Let's also now lower the flaps to 10 degrees. It'll take a few seconds for the number 1 engine to warm up. Once that's complete, we can then increase the throttle, set the taxi lights to active, and then make our way over to the runway. So once again, we're watching the engine stabilise, and also for the start switch to return back to normal. We can now turn off the APU. At this stage, we'll now be requesting our taxi clearance from ATC. Once we have it, taxi lights come on, parking brake off, increase the throttle, and let's go make our way to the runway. As we approach the runway, what we're then going to do is stop at the hold short marker just at the end of the runway. What this does is it maintains a safe distance between our aircraft and the runway, and therefore any aircraft coming into land or those taking off, we are far enough away from the landing zone just to ensure that there's safe distance between us on the ground. At this stage, we'll now get clearance from ATC and also perform a visual check to make sure that the runway is clear and that there are no aircraft or vehicles currently on the runway. All looking good. We can then turn on the strobe lights, turn on the landing lights, turn off the taxi lights, enter the runway, and prepare the aircraft for flights. So let's increase the throttle ever so slightly. I'm also going to use the ICAS display and swap them around. That way we have our map on the left hand side, and on the right hand side we'll just have the engine information and system. That way it's a bit more clearer for me to see where I'm going and how our engine's performing. Just then rotate the aircraft, center it on the runway. And as soon as we're ready to go, increase throttle to around 40%. Watch the M1 then for both engines 1 and 2. If they're both stable, we can then increase the throttle and prepare the aircraft for takeoff. Knots. B1 and rotate. Check for positive climb, raise the gear. And in the Boeing aircraft, on the PFD, you can see a few numbers in green just off of the airspeed indicator. So what that does is it indicates to you what speed you need to be at before you start raising the gear. Make a right hand turn, start flying the first heading. Up to 5 degrees. Flaps up to 2 degrees. 1, that's up entirely. And now at this stage we can bring on your autopilot systems with LNAV and VNAV active. Now our aircraft then continues to climb and eventually make its way up to cruise. So that was the takeoff and setup of the Boeing 787 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Cold and dark, FMS setup, engine starts, taxi and takeoff. And I hope that this tutorial helps you in finding your way around the long-haul modern Boeing jets. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like if you did, if you also found it helpful as well. Please consider sharing it as well. If you have friends who don't know how to set the aircraft up, then hopefully this video here will give them an idea of what they need to do in order to get the airplanes running. Otherwise, I thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you again in the very near future. Take care and goodbye.